Hey my dear Wingfoil friends, it's Max from Germany again, and yesterday I actually forgot my leash on the board and had to go on the water without a board leash, and this experience I will share with you today, and at the end of the video I'll tell you again whether I would generally ride without a leash in the future or if I will put a leash on the board again next time. Subscribe to the channel below and give it a thumbs up. And right at the beginning, I have to say that since my first time on the water, I was a bit skeptical with the board leash right from the start. At the very beginning, I had this twisted coiled hip leash on the board, and somehow I always had the problem that it got in the way every time. Either I stood on it with my feet or it didn't slide around when I changed direction, and somehow it just got in the way every single time. By the way, have you ever tried a coiled hip leash too? What are your experiences with it? Please write in the comments below. Yes, and then I got myself a foot leash next, and I have to be honest, I was actually really happy with it. I got myself a relatively short leash so that it didn't drag around so much in the water when I was riding, and furthermore the board wasn't so far away when I fell and I could move on again quickly. And the other day during the video shoot for the new Vayu Fly Board, I took the leash off and forgot to put it back on afterwards. So yesterday I was forced to go out on the water without a leash, and the first thing I realized about the board leash is that it's definitely a psychological factor. If you have a leash on your board, you can go out on the water with total ease and don't have to worry about where your board is. You fall in and immediately know your board will be somewhere within a maximum radius of 2 meters from you, and you can also feel the pull on the leash and actually know quite intuitively where your board is. But if you don't have a leash on the board, then somehow that feeling of safety goes away. You fall in and don't really know where your board is at first. You have to orientate on the water and see where your board is, and I imagine this scenario to be really hard, especially for beginners. And speaking of beginners, if you still need a few good tips for your first steps in wingfoiling, then be sure to download my free ebook. I will tell you which mistakes you should avoid at the beginning. You will find the link to the free ebook in the video description below. And now imagine you are flying and sometimes you have a lot of speed, and when you fall off your board it doesn't suddenly stop. It easily likes to go 3, 4, 5 meters further. That means you have to swim to your board first. That might not sound too dramatic at first, but you have to remember that you still have a wing on your wrist and it pulls and tucks you like a dog on a leash, and then you try to swim to your board on the side. And I just let go of the wing, which is still on the leash, and try to crawl towards the board, but it was really hard. It really takes energy, and especially with the cold water now in winter, it's not really that pleasant. And I really noticed that after a short time I was much more exhausted than usual, because it's just super exhausting to keep swimming after the board every time. And there aren't even any waves on my lake. But if I imagine riding on the North or Baltic Sea without a leash on the board, and then a wave pushes my board another 10 meters, I think you will be done with the session faster than you'd like. And I also have to honestly say that you then really think twice about trying new maneuvers, because you just know that the next takeoff will take longer because you have to swim again and catch your board first. That's definitely 1,000 times better when riding with a leash. You fall in, pull your board, and off you go. Where I do see an advantage, however, is when you start jumping. It can really be an advantage if you can push the board away from you quickly, but since I don't jump when wingfoiling anyway, the leash doesn't really bother me. Sometimes it's a bit in the way and you might stand on it with your foot, but that's not so wild. Then you just waddle a bit on the board and the problem solves itself. I also remember when I was kiting, I used to take off my foot out of the strap in the air, or later on I was also riding with boots on the board, and then you always have to board firmly on your foot. But I've also lost a kiteboard on the Baltic Sea because I didn't have a leash on the board in offshore winds. Yeah, and honestly guys, since the last session I really appreciate the board leash, especially now in winter with the cold water, and that's why I'll be using the leash again in the future. I tied it to the bottom of the board again today, and I can only recommend a board leash, especially for beginners, because it just gives you that extra bit of security and you can really go out on the water without worrying, and you simply have a better feeling. And tell me, have you ever wingfoiled without a leash, and which board leash do you actually use? I will also put you a link to the leash I'm currently using down in the video description. And if you click on the video over here, you can also see my first attempt on a board under 100 liters. I thought it was going to be quite a shaky ride at first, but see for yourself and click on the video here.